We are a good week into the Christmas school break, so I want to traumatize your children and talk about school. There you go. I want to talk about school. I could wax and wane quite a bit about Corpus Christi School, how we are blessed to have this brand new facility, blessed with a good standing in the education system. I could speak at some length about these blessings, but what I really want to do is launch into another kind of school, and that is one far more important, and which this school, is actually based upon, or the reason for its existence. And this is the all-important school of the family. While our school was built by a company called Ventana, God built the school of the family. God could have come into the world in any number of ways, but he chose to come into the world by way of a family. Children learn a great deal when they go to school. Presumably, they learn a lot when they go to our school of Corpus Christi. If, however, you want the school of your family to learn the most valuable life lessons, which will help them thrive in the world and reach their potential while here, and then the most important goal of all, which is eternal life, because what does it profit a man if he has 3 or 4 PhDs but doesn't get to the goal? It's heaven. What does it matter? But that is our desire. Hopefully it's your desire. Then it's important to look at the school of the family of Nazareth. Your family, in fact, can learn, all of our families can learn, 3 valuable lessons reflecting on this family. What we learn from the home of Nazareth is to build our family around Jesus Christ. And this is basically, fundamentally, foundationally, what Mary and Joseph did. Our Lady and St. Joseph had plans to get married before God entered their life in this unique and special way. It really was a one-off, if you think about it, because Mary was asked to be the mother of the Messiah. That's never going to be repeated. But they had already intended to be married before that. It changed everything in their life. Not the fact that they were going to be married, but that it wasn't just going to be a child, but in their case, it was going to be the Messiah, the Son of God. So this changed everything, and they reordered their lives around Christ, around the child. This is the first lesson that we learn from Nazareth, and that is to build our personal and our family life around Jesus Christ. What does this look like? There are many things or ways in which this sort of takes on a face, if you will. But for starters, any home has its fair share of noise. It's just a reality of life, of family life. This is actually a good thing. But all of us can learn from the Holy Family to appreciate the importance of silence. And by this, I don't mean there are many kinds of silence. But what I don't mean here is the silence of an imposed kind of absence of noise. Or when people are too noisy and somebody says, "Would you just shut up?" And they actually listen so nobody talks. Not that kind of silence. Many different kinds of silence. Rather, this is the silence needed for prayer. A silence needed for study and homework, reading. We are surrounded by, and all too often saturated with, the noise of the television, or to subjecting ourselves to too much screen time. Now, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with screen time. Some people make their living by it. Most of us probably have tablets or iPhones or computers. But it's a matter of, are we even consciously aware? Are we trying to step outside of ourselves and asking ourselves, how much time do I, and I say not so much in terms of work, but do I subject myself to, do I allow myself to be drawn into the world of the screens? Because this often strips us of the ability of having quiet within ourselves. It agitates the human heart. The screens themselves, the whiteness, at least from the little reading that I've done, are intentionally geared to fire off, I believe it's dopamine in our brain. So that we want to look more. We want to look more. We want that flash, 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 flash. It's intentional. It's like pumping oxygen into the casinos 24 hours a day, so you will keep playing. If you didn't know that, they do it. I think they still do it. They used to do it for sure. So it's important that we navigate this rather than we can't throw out the machines as far as I'm concerned, but navigate through them so that we're cultivating times of silence in our life. It is so important for us. How do you cultivate this specifically with a busy life that has children in the home? But it applies even if you don't have children in the home. It's just a different way of applying it. After the children are asleep, this is one example. Take the first few minutes to strive to have quiet time, maybe 15 minutes, rather than sit down in the chair and turn on the television. But actually invest time to be quiet for a while and to pray. Or strive to get up before you know the children are going to get up. But see, it involves a whole series of virtues, disciplines that are so important, like when you have to get up at a certain time, you have to go to bed at a certain time. You know, I'm harping about this because that's the way I am. Because it's so important, it's foundational. It's not just because I like discipline, I'm a weird guy. But it's actually important for people. This is why I'm passionate about it. It's a foundational thing. If we're not going to bed I never say the time, but I say at the right time to get up at the right time, our day's going to be a mess. Because we need sleep. It's medicine. It's elixir for the soul and the mind and the body. Otherwise, the next day, you may cheat for a couple of days, but the older you get, the less you can cheat. You're going to run out of fumes or out of gas. Work productivity goes down, you're more grumpy, you can't pray, you can't focus, all sorts of things. So to know when I need to go to bed, and this is very hard for people, because I hear it a lot in the box. I have to remind myself every night, people know I go to bed early because I get up early. And there's still nights after all these years when I say, go to bed, go to bed, go to bed. You got to get to bed. Because I'm not changing the alarm clock time. So it has to sort of go back this way, right? And I got to remind myself, it's not automatic. I'm not an angel. I'm not in heaven yet. Still have to work at it. So it's really super important. But it's done, it is for the health of the mind and body, but so that we have time to be quiet. After the kids are down or before the kids are up. So that's the first lesson, having Jesus the center of our life and having that quiet time in our life that we all need. The second lesson families can learn from Nazareth is the value of family life. Many of the virtues we need for healthy interaction with others come from within the family. This is so important that the church, actually in John Paul II, when he wrote this document on Christian family in the modern world many years ago, he said, when children are raised by their parents, that's actually the first marriage course. He called it the proximate preparation for marriage. It's not when they come to me, they want to get married, and they say, got to take the marriage prep course. Okie dokie. They kind of know it already. But that's not the first marriage course. It's actually all the years they've been in the family. That's the first marriage course. Remote preparation for marriage. Why? Because they're learning how to live in proximity with other people. It's kind of important when you get married, right? You're learning how to fight or how to have disagreements. We don't fight. How to have disagreements. You're learning how to forgive. It goes on, and all essential characteristics, virtues needed for a healthy marriage. Healthy friendships. In fact, being a healthy priest. You got to, because I'm not perfect. And if you don't know that, have a head check. I'm not perfect, right? So I've got to learn to forgive. I've got to learn to be forgiven. How do I do that? How do I interact with people? Most important lesson I've ever learned is not in seminary. It's not in the priesthood. It's from my mom and dad. And all I say is in 3 words. Never give up. That's all I'll say. But that's a very pregnant, dynamic statement for me. It means a lot. There's a whole life involved in that. Never give up. It doesn't come from basketball. It doesn't come from the seminary. It doesn't come from the priesthood. It comes from my mother and father, watching them, living with them. It's a foundational thing in my life. So this requires an education in apprenticeship and self-denial, sound judgment and self-mastery. These are the preconditions the Catechism identifies in 22:23. These are the preconditions for true freedom. Unless these three things are present, we find it very difficult to be truly free. When I say free, I don't mean free to do whatever I want. That's how many people define freedom today. But freedom is to do what is right in accord with the Lord's will. That's going to serve my true good and the good of other people around me. So I need to deny myself in healthy ways. I need to learn how to live out and give sound judgment, make wise decisions, and be master of myself so that I'm not the slave of my environment, so to speak. We learn these things, or we don't learn them from family life. That's why many people grow up and they say, I can't control myself. And I want to say, yes, you can. But I can't give them an hour lesson. They're in confession. They got to get in and get out. But the point being, it's not impossible. Because we're all the same stuff. We're all made of the same stuff. We just have to hopefully go to the right source, get the right mentor, the right person to encourage us or to show us the way. And this is why I'm presenting the Holy Family. Because we can learn, even though we can't talk to them the way you're listening to me. God bless all of you. But we can learn from them by reflecting on the Scriptures. And even then, bouncing it off our own family life experience. Self-denial, sound judgment, and self-mastery are the three things necessary for true freedom. Parents need to be aware of teaching your children to subordinate instinctual desires for higher goods. The next Sunday will be a prime example. You got to get to bed because you got to go to school tomorrow. So all the kids will hear that, right? I don't want to go to school. You have to go to school, so you got to get to bed at the right time. No staying up late anymore if you've been allowed to stay up late. Got to subordinate the higher good of going to school and learning, getting a degree, putting food on the table. The kid doesn't understand that. He just knows he has to go to bed because the parents are wise. They have perspective. We learn to forgive those who are living in close contact. We are living in close contact with. This is a huge virtue. We learn to cooperate in running of the house, jobs and chores that need to be done. Again, maybe I'll hit the guys harder, but it could be the girl too. But if the guy thinks that the girl should do everything in the house, that's not going to go well very long. My mother taught me to make beds and clean toilets. Why? And also to do the dishes. Simple tasks, right? She said, look, if you're ever on your own, you're going to have to do this yourself. Isn't that a duh lesson? But some men maybe think that women should do all this stuff. Nothing is below our dignity. This is an important virtue to be able to live with somebody. We learn cooperation. We learn to give way. It's not always my way. It can't be always my way. Only Jesus can say it's always my way or the highway, because Jesus is never wrong. We learn not to be the center of the universe. So everybody has to walk around eggshells around me because otherwise all hell's going to break loose. We learn to make life pleasant for others, dying to myself for the good of the people I care about. So many lessons we can learn by reflecting on the Holy Family. The third lesson we learn from the Holy Family is the importance of work. Work is so often seen as drudgery. We think of work as a punishment for sin. It's not. Adam was working before original sin. Many people go to work like the galley slaves. You've seen one of those movies? Well, maybe not the young kids, but the older people, you've seen some movie with galley slaves. Think that the people are rowing, it's always men, rowing, and the guys behind them whipping them, and they're doing this all day long. They hate it. They're slaves, right? They're getting no money. They're not getting any reward except they have to do this. Many people go to work like that. That's the way they see the work if you really unpeel, what's deep down inside. But reflecting on the life of Joseph and Mary and Jesus, we begin to see that work is something that actually helps us grow closer to God. And it doesn't matter how menial or ordinary the task is. Everything, if it's legitimate, if it's ethical, everything can be raised to the order of the supernatural if it is offered to God. And I'll give a few points about how this is done. What does it mean to make of our work an offering to God? Work is a big part of our life, 8 to 10 hours. Joseph worked, Mary worked, and Jesus himself worked for many years as a carpenter before he began his earthly ministry. So what does it look like to have our work, to have our work be a pleasing offering to God? These are just a few things. We do it with a good spirit rather than moaning and groaning, whether it's out loud or in our own hearts. There's nothing worse than going through 8 or 10 hours a day and you're just moaning and you're groaning. And we can all do it, but okay, what's the choice? What choice am I going to make? Try to do it with a good spirit. We do it, try to offer this to God when we do it, and when it needs to be done with the time that we have to do it. In other words, we're trying not to procrastinate. You know, all of us probably have something in our mind right now. If I said, what's the one thing that you're procrastinating at doing that it classifies as work or for your work, which includes housework, by the way, housework and work outside the home, that you're putting off, or your homework that you're putting off, leaving studying to the last minute, then it classifies as one of these things. And trying to do that when it needs to be done. It's a very hard thing to do. But it's actually so important. It involves a real virtue of sacrificing, my desire to just not deal with it, not put it off. Desire to strive to offer our work with prayer. So, I'm distracted a lot. This stuff, I don't have it down pat. I'm not an angel yet. Well, I won't be an angel, but I'm not in heaven yet. So I put a crucifix by my workplace, my table, and I look at it frequently and I say, Lord, another 15 minutes, help me to try. And my mind is all over the place, 5 different directions. And I keep looking at the crucifix, Lord, help me to focus, help me to focus. And then finishing it off well, trying to finish it off well, not to 95%, but down to the last period if you're writing an essay. Down to the last period, and then reviewing it, editing it to try and see if you can do a little better, catch mistakes, and so on. These are just a few ways to make our work pleasing, a pleasing offering to the Lord. The church holds up the family on this Sunday, and there's so much that we can learn from the example of the family of Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. It's not a matter of being the Holy Family. None of us can be, but learning from it. Discovering the necessity of a good kind of silence in our life, practicing the many virtues that are so important for relationships, like forgiveness and living in close proximity with imperfect people that we love. All of us are imperfect. Nobody is married to the perfect individual. But sometimes I think a flaw is that people marry an image of what they want that person to be, and they never allow them to actually be who they are. So they're marrying a fantasy. They're marrying a projection of what they want. And a person can never live up to that. If God doesn't love us that way. God loves me with all my flaws, all my imperfections, all the sins that I've ever committed. He still loves me. It's very difficult to wrap our heads around this. But that's the way to love somebody. It doesn't mean he's approved of it, but he's never walked away from me. So people love each other in their relationships, and learning to forgive is just so huge. And then offering our work as a prayer to God, which means struggling to do it on time and as best as we can. Who do we desire our family life to be modeled after? There are many possible answers to this question. The church holds out the Holy Family not as some impossible standard that is unattainable, but as a family we can learn from, to be mentored by. Let us all strive, like Mary and Joseph, to begin this by putting Jesus in the center of our lives, in the center of our family life.